Good afternoon, and welcome to Life Along the Merrimack. I am Dyke Hendrickson, the host, and I am the outreach historian for the Custom House Maritime Museum. And I am in an ebullient mood at the moment. I just finished my Coast Guard book with the help of proofreader Beth Welch. She lives in Newbury. She's been with numerous publishing houses, and she was kind enough to go over and read the final version. So the book is called New England Coast Guard Stories, and it'll be out in March, I'm told. I've been told that before, but it's about 40,000 words, about 60 photos, and so I'm quite pleased with that. On this program, Life Along the Merrimack, we frequently have guests, and I was going to have a guest today, author Ann Easter Smith, who just has a book out. She lives locally, and it's her fifth or sixth book, so I thought that would be interesting. But she couldn't make it on a Wednesday. Now that brings up something. We are usually on Tuesday. But I am solo today, in part because I could not make it yesterday. I was at jury duty. But when we get to it, I will want to discuss William Wheelwright, which was a great mariner, a great businessman, and he did most of his business in South America. But he was a titan in South America, born in Newburyport, got his start here, went to South America. And because I just got back from South America, I am interested in talking about him and let it be known that he was a great all-star here and again in Ecuador, in Chile, and Venezuela. So my event yesterday was the jury pool. And so, like a good citizen, I went to Salem, and I had much trouble finding a parking spot. If you've ever been to the court in Salem, you'll know that it's difficult, if you don't know the area, to find something. We had a jury pool of 150, and it was a 4-hour wait because they start you, they register you, they have you fill out a questionnaire, and I had to wait actually 6 hours to be called by the judge. Now, it turned out I was not chosen. The case was aggravated rape of a minor, which is not a very uplifting crime. I mean, you could argue what crime is uplifting. But when the judge questioned me as to whether I thought I could be unbiased, I said, I don't think I can be unbiased because I'm a career journalist. I've served at places, including the Boston Herald and the Portland Press Herald up in Maine. And I covered many criminal trials. I covered much crime. I interviewed numerous criminals, actually. And I once interviewed a fellow who was about to be tried for slitting the throat of a 12-year-old girl up in York, Maine. This is years ago. But so anyway, I just told the judge, it's my feeling that if they're here, if they've been arrested, they're in court, and they've been vetted, they might very well be guilty. So for that reason, I was excused. Now that my book on the Merrimack, on the Coast Guard has been finished, I'm free to start my next book, which is The History of the Merrimack River. This is an exciting event for me. I have a contract with the Fonthill Press, which is in South Carolina. It was created by the fellow who started the Arcadia Press and the History Press. I've done 3 books with those publishers. The last one was not a good experience. It sat there for 11 and a half months without an editor, without a date. But I have been offered that, and so I'm about to sign it. Because when you think of the Merrimack River, now obviously we talk about the history and health of the Merrimack River here. When you think about the Merrimack, many major events happened here. It is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. This we know, and there's a plaque right down on the river here in Newburyport. It hosted the start of the Industrial Revolution with the creation of huge textile mills in Lowell and Lawrence, later Haverhill, Amesbury, other communities. And it was the site of one of the first labor strikes in U.S. history. That was in 1914. And today, more than 24 communities are on the Merrimack. It's 117 miles long. It goes deep into New Hampshire, up to Lake Winnipesaukee, as a matter of fact. So much has happened here, and I'm excited about this project because even regular folk are concerned about the Merrimack right now. It is getting dirtier, not cleaner. In 2016, it was named one of the nation's dirtiest rivers. And we've talked about this. The climate change is creating great bursts of rainstorms. And upriver in Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill, their sewage treatment plants are on the river. When a lot of rainwater goes into the sewage treatment plant, it becomes overwhelmed and there is a discharge. Now, everything is discharged, the rainwater, but also the raw sewage. So after 2 or 3 days storms, we have sewage coming down the Merrimack River in large quantities. Now, one of the challenges, I must say, is they haven't yet been able to quantify how much sewage does come down from a given treatment plant and how much is it diluted. But we've had people on this show, Life Along the Merrimack, who kayak or fish, and they said, several days later, you can see the effluent right in the river, and it's, not an uplifting moment for those people. And even the group that went last summer, it was called the Voyagers. They went 117 miles downriver, and that would include kayaking, staying overnight, kayaking again. Some of those folks said, we saw raw sewage in the river because it was after a rain. Now, I must say, Mayor Donna Holliday and State Senator Diana DiZoglio are trying to pass a bill that would enable or would require sewage treatment plant operators to let people downstream know when they've had a discharge. Now, this makes sense. But I was at a conference of managers of plants, and they said, look, we're not health officials. That isn't what we do. And it's true, they don't. But it seems like it would be easy enough to get a group together and say, either online or, as the mayor, Donna Holliday, suggested, have flags raised when it becomes known that there's been a major discharge upriver. So that is one of those things that we're working on. I shouldn't say we. I am, of course, a dispassionate journalist. But many people are working on a way, number one, to have a warning system, and number two, work with city and state and federal officials to create a program where the rainwater does not go into the treatment plants. The treatment plants are good, except because of climate change and bursts of rain, they are getting too much water in them. And so that is one thing that we've talked about here. It's going to be ongoing. And we might remember, it's back in 1971, so some people would not remember 1971. But the Clean Water Act was passed, and that created some significant federal regulations that made plants, not so much sewage treatment plants, but textile plants and paper mills, put in more hardware. They had to make their discharge much cleaner. Now, there is a bill that exists right now in Washington that it's an access bill that really does what we're talking about. It would address sewage treatment plants that overflow, and it would provide funding for them to change the way that their sewer pipes work. In other words, a lot of the rainwater would not go into the treatment plant any longer. It would go elsewhere. Of course, in the federal world, the trick is funding. I mean, the legislation exists, and numerous our congressional representatives are aware of that. However, right now there's no money there. But that is one of the elements that's out there. And one of the things I wanted to mention as well, so that'll be my book, Life Along the Merrimack, or it could be Merrimack, the Resilient River. I don't have a title yet, but I'll be starting on that soon. And I'm going to be looking for, people who are interested, people who might contribute photos or information about it. So if you see me on the street or in a bistro, just say, look, here's an idea about your river, your book about the river. Now, as I recently said, I was in Colombia, in the Southern Hemisphere, Bogota, Colombia first, and then Santa Marta, Colombia. Our son, Dyke Hendrickson, got married there. She is from Colombia. She grew up in Bogota. She went to Emmanuel College in Boston. They met in Boston, and they decided to get married in Colombia because she has much family in Colombia, in Bogota and Santa Marta. Now, Santa Marta is a city of about 400,000 or 500,000 on the Atlantic, and it's very warm there. I hate to say it, but it's 89 degrees every day. Actually, I don't hate to say it. I like to remember it, but I don't want to seem like I'm flaunting this wonderful week in the sunshine. And so what they did is one day we went out on a vessel, a boat, about a half hour from Santa Marta, is to a national park. And nothing has been done to this national park. There are no docks. There are no restaurants. There is no nothing, no people. And it struck me that, and there was a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, the sands were white, and the water was clear. It was a travel brochure come true. Most brochures, as we know, are not exactly. Their veracity is wanting. But this was not wanting. The water was clear. The snorkeling was wonderful. And it must look like what Maui looked like or Oahu looked like in Hawaii, 4 or 5 centuries ago. There's nothing there, and it was just wonderful. And then, of course, they had the wedding ceremony. That was terrific. And we came home. And as I was thinking about it, I did remember a fellow from Newburyport who was one of the great luminaries in Newburyport history. Not that we all know about it, but his name was William Wheelwright. He was born in Newburyport in 1798. His father had ships, and he grew up on High Street. In fact, you may know the house. Of course, it's still there. It's now a medical center, kind of a retirement home, and it's on High Street. It's still used until about a dozen years ago. It was known as the Home for Aging Women, and now it is an assisted care living site for older folks. I might say that the organization for aging women here in this area still exists. So if you know an aging woman or someone who is destitute, this organization still has money and they still give it out. But I mention Wheelwright because how many historic figures in Newburyport do we know? Well, there's Caleb Cushing. He was the first mayor of this city. He was a congressman. He was the Attorney General of the United States. He was ambassador to Russia. And he became mayor in 1851. That'll give you a little. He was born in about 1800, actually the same time as Wheelwright. And his house is still on High Street, 98 High Street. So we do know Caleb Cushing. We do know Anna Jakes. She was the benefactor who started the Anna Jakes Hospital in about 1880 or 1890, gave about $22,000. That got it started. And, of course, the Anna Jakes Medical Center has grown very large. It has more than 1,000 employees, making it the largest employer in Newburyport. And she is remembered to us as well. We remember Bossy Gillis as well. He was the mayor 5 or 6 different times. That when the mayor's term, that was when the mayor's term was much shorter. He would run, serve a year or two, be defeated, serve a year or two, run again. I mean, this happened several times. And he had a gas station right down where the kayak shop is now on Merrimack Street near the bridge. And so we've heard of him. But if you think of people, we haven't heard of so many. So that's why I am interested in not discussing. I have no one to discuss it with today. I am interested in talking about William Wheelwright. And he was born in Newburyport, as we say, and was a great luminary. And I guess the one reason why I am so impressed with his life is because he became a tycoon in another country, and that is not easy to do. So William Wheelwright was born in 1798. He died in 1873. He was a businessman who played an essential role in the development of the steamboat and train transportation in Chile and other parts of South America. In 1838, with help from the Chilean government, he founded the Pacific Steam Navigation Company, which commenced operations in October of 1840. And it provided commercial sea access to cities such as Valparaiso. Wheelwright also owned the Central Argentine Railway, a company established in 1863 that built and operated railways in the eastern region of Argentina. Now, can you imagine how difficult it is to go to a foreign country? And the reason he started in South America, because he washed up on shore there. And just to go over the literature, I am taking this from a short history, so it's not my work, but I am happy to have found it. Wheelwright lived in a home on High Street and attended public school until he was about 12. He was sent to Andover Academy, where he completed his education. Wheelwright's father was a shipmaster in early life, and William soon showed a desire to pursue the same vocation. He shipped as a cabin boy on a vessel bound to the West Indies, and during the next 2 or 3 years as a teenager and young man in his 20s, he rose to the rank of captain, and he was a captain when he was only 19 years old, so he was very capable. In 1823, he was in command of a ship known as the Rising Empire, owned by William Bartlett. You may know the term Bartlett Mal. When the vessel was wrecked off the coast of South America near the mouth of the Rio La Plata. Now, that's where a connection comes in. I wonder the same thing. Okay, fine. He's a luminary in South America, but how did it happen? So it turns out he was in a shipwreck, which many Newburyporters were. I think we know that ships were wrecked all the time, washed up on shore. But he was the captain of the ship, and he reached shore after it went to ground. It washed out again, but he was in the ocean for about 24 hours in an open boat. One man was lost. On his arrival at Buenos Aires, Wheelwright obtained a position as a supercargo executive of a vessel about to sail for Valparaiso, which is Chile. The voyage took 4 or 5 months to complete, using the route around Cape Horn. He was interested in studying, and he studied on ship, and he learned more about business on the coast of West South America. And then he traveled to Guayaquil, a seaport in Ecuador, where he decided to remain. So now it's 1825. He's in Ecuador. He was appointed United States consul at that port. 3 years later, he left his business in the hands of his partner and returned home to Newburyport and stayed here for several years. So he was in Ecuador, he started a business, he came back. He married Martha Garish of Newburyport on February 1829. Now, Kurt Garish, as you might know, is the CEO of Rochester Electronics. I don't know if they're related. I would think they might be. Rochester Electronics is the most successful enterprise in our industrial park. It's growing. It's a terrific business. Anyway, he marries Martha Garish in 1829, and returned with her to Guayaquil, Ecuador. Wheelwright discovered that nearly all of his property had been lost during his absence through negligence and mismanagement by his partner. He decided to return to Valparaiso, Chile, and bought a small vessel, which he named 4th of July. And he went to work being a trader of bullion and other goods from port to port along the coast. And again, he must have been very smart, very driven, and he started finding success in Chile. In 1835, he started the task of establishing a line of steamers between Peru and Chile and Europe. Now, can you imagine how far that is from Chile and Peru to Europe? That is very far. And he went to England in 1837 to raise funds, and in 1838, the Pacific Steam Navigation Company was formed with about 250,000 pounds. That's probably about $25 million. But he must have been a very convincing young man. He's 35 now, because he got the money. 2 steamers, each of 700 tons, were built in 1840 and ordered to proceed to Valparaiso. Excuse me. So he has a wonderful small company, and after the arrival of the steamers in the Pacific coast, Wheelwright discovered the difficulty of procuring coal and the impossibility of providing for unexpected repairs and expenses. These obstacles grew, and he's kind of slowed down on the steamship line. But get this, now he goes into railroads. Wheelwright built the first South American railroad when it extended nearly 40 miles into the interior of Chile. Now, it was very hard to build railroads. I mean, I think we know that from our own American history. You're in a foreign country. It's a wild land. And yet this is what you do. It's an enormous task. He must have had a tremendous amount of energy. In 1841, he became interested in a plan to unite Valparaiso in Chile with Buenos Aires by rail over the mountain range that separates Chile from Argentina. Now, there is a task. The survey work was completed in 1859, but the Chilean government considered the difficulties too great to be successful, and the enterprise was abandoned. You can't say he didn't dream big. Wheelwright later moved to Argentina, where he built the Central Argentine Railway that joined the cities of Cordoba and Rosario. The company had been established in London and signed a contract to get the business going in 1863. The contract included inclusive rights to railroad and transportation to the Andes. Again, can you imagine how difficult it is to build? But a railroad was not built through the Andes for reasons that I have kind of outlined. And but he kept his hand in steamships, he kept in rail, and he was truly very successful. He died in London in 1873, so that he was about 75 years old. A small town in Santa Fe, Argentina, was named after him. So this is my excitement for the day, that a Newburyporter who washed up on shore in South America in about 1820, became a businessman, became a steamship owner, became the owner of railroad lines, and also several of his projects did not come to fruition, which is one in putting a train through the Andes, and believe me, I can't imagine how that could be done. I think we all know our own stories about the Trans-Pacific Railroad here in the United States, when the East Coast and the West Coast were linked by the railroad, and I think that was in about 1879. The final spike was driven. But that came through parts of the Rocky Mountains. There were a tremendous number of deaths, tremendous number of difficult moments. I think many Chinese immigrants were brought in for the Pacific side of that. And so their lives were well known. Also, the railroad went out from the East Coast, and many Irish and Germans signed on from there. So this is one of the great moments in U.S. history. The two coasts were joined. At this time, they also had communication by wire through telegraph from east to west. And I think if you remember your Civil War history, one of the great events of the Civil War was the communication. Lincoln was in communication, with many of his generals, including General Grant and General Sherman. And so he would have a day-to-day report, including such battles as Gettysburg and the Siege of Vicksburg. And this was really a remarkable technological breakthrough, probably like the Internet is in our era. I mean, I'm still amazed by the Internet. It's been around, as we know, for about 25 years. No, I should say the Internet was started in 1969 at MIT, UCLA, and Michigan. The World Wide Web was started in the mid-'90s by an Englishman named Tim Berners-Lee. And when I was at the Boston Business Journal, Tim Berners-Lee actually took my phone calls because I was writing about technology. But that's a long way in the past. But the technology of the telegraph was amazing. The rail was amazing. Newburyport was amazing. At this time, say the 1890s, the last of our large wooden vessels were being built. Newburyport did not get into the age of steam, in part because our entrance to the river is so shallow that the boats got very heavy. And, excuse me, I have a bit of a cough today, perhaps picked up in Bogota. But we didn't get into the age of steam. The age of sail ended in about 1895 or 1900 here in Newburyport. So I am going to end it for the day right now, partially because of this dastardly cold I'm getting. But also, I did want to talk about William Wheelwright, an amazing person, born in Newburyport, educated here, was the son of a captain himself, ship owner. He washed up on shore when he was in his 20s. He became a titan in different parts of South America, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina. There is still the Wheelwright House. In fact, it's in my last book, which is called Nautical Newburyport. I do believe it's here, and I am now looking for it. The Wheelwright House, yes, it is. It was built on Upper High Street, and it just, in 1797, he must have been the first owner there. In fact, there's a very nice picture of him and a short bio right in front of the house. And as I said, it's on High Street. Come to find out, it is not the home for assisted living. That's right next to it. But, you get the idea that it's on High Street. There is a short bio of Wheelwright, and it's one of the most beautiful houses on High Street. So that is it for me. I am Dyke Hendrickson. This is Life Along the Merrimack. We're here every Tuesday. Now, I know this is Wednesday, but we've already discussed my jury duty in Salem. So we're going to sign off. Next week, we'll be talking about the Merrimack River again, the health and history of the river. So until that time, I will be researching. I will be looking for guests. I will be starting my new book, Life Along the Merrimack, or Merrimack, the Resilient River. So until next week, thank you very much.